Yes.
Welcome, Miracles Tribe community and Miracles Attraction Facebook community. We're so happy to be with you again today. And we have another amazing guest in our interview series on people whose lives have been positively transformed by their practice of A Course in Miracles. So Carly will introduce Cate Grieves to you. She's coming to us all the way from Australia. Take it away, Carly.
A warm welcome, Cate. We are happy to have you with us. I'm Carly Judd Hardy, and along with Teresa McGallagher, we love hosting this interview series so that you can get a taste of people whose lives have been changed by their interaction with A Course in Miracles. So Cate came across the non-duality teachings in A Course in Miracles in a bookshop in 1999. In January of 2013, she set an intention to undo all the fear thoughts in her mind so she could experience this peace of mind the Course offers. Little did she know that her mind would go through a massive transformation and that 12 months later, she would have a revelation experience, and then a further 12 months later, an awakening to this perfect love. So Cate, this is just a beautiful lead in to your story and gets us all excited to hear, yes, how this Course in Miracles was transformative in your life. So we'll turn it over to you now and have you add whatever else you want to your awakening story. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Carly and Teresa, and thank you everyone who's listening in at a later time. So I felt like I was like everyone else in terms of I didn't really understand spirituality. I didn't have anything special about me. As a young child, I felt drawn to Jesus when I was a Catholic. My family was Catholic, and I felt this resonance with Jesus when I was at church. But I also felt intuitively that the priest that was giving the sermon wasn't hitting the mark. I felt this sense of confusion by the message and not clear, because I felt that what was being told to me was, that God was punishing and wrathful, but also loving. And I feared God from that. I felt God was looking at me, judging me, and ready to punish me. And if something went wrong, I would say, well, God punished me, right? So I was like everyone else. I was really disheartened, disillusioned, couldn't find a truth anywhere, searching for many years. I suffered depression and anxiety. I had chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia that was getting worse. I had a daughter that had been raped and had turned to hard drugs. I had broken marriages. I was trying to climb a career ladder and finding, no real pleasure or happiness there. So I did all the searching and the looking and the seeking outside, not in spirituality, but outside me. And so I started off in one moment of real angst. I was sort of like this calling of the heart, like, I need help, but not even realising I was asking it. But, there's that moment where you just say, look, nothing's working. I feel despair. So I went to a bookshop, and there was one course book on the bookshelf. And as I pulled it out, I heard the words, "This is the only book you need. Throw out the rest," because I had, the self-help bookcase at home. So I went home and I bought the book, and I went home and I read through it, but I couldn't really understand any of it. And so from 1999 to January 2013, I pulled it out and looked at it and put it back in the bookcase, and just like I just couldn't get it. And I practiced the lessons. I couldn't understand much of it. And then in January 2013, it was like New Year's Eve. I had broken up with a partner, a guy I was going out with, and it was all messy and horrible. And I just thought, you know what, I'm so done with these type of relationships. Why don't they ever work out? I don't know why nothing ever works out, and why I have so much fear. And there was just this sort of moment in those first 2 weeks of January 2013. There was sort of this real sort of giving up, this sort of like nothing works, just nothing, everything I've tried doesn't work. It's all going to shit. So, right. And so I remember sitting down on my bed and opening the course up and saying, you know, the one thing that I haven't done is I haven't really done this Course in Miracles properly. I've never done it really the way it's meant to be done. I've never done the lessons all the way through. I've got it out and opened it, or went back to lesson 1 and started again and given up, thinking I don't understand it, not realizing I'm never going to understand it. It's the brat. So I didn't even read the instructions for the lessons properly. So I decided then that because I felt this hopelessness of seeing that there was nothing to get in the world, that I'd sought all these avenues everywhere I'd gone and not found happiness or peace. In fact, I felt quite a lot of despair. I said to myself, I'm going to do this Course in Miracles 100%. I'm going to do it with all my might, with every part of my being. It's my only hope, because this book says that it can bring me peace, and nothing else has brought me peace. So I said to myself, I'm going to give this 2 years. I'm going to devote every single moment of the next 2 years to its teachings. I'm going to, I didn't know how that was going to happen. It was just this, what he calls this readiness and this willingness to do it properly, you could say, because you have to get to a stage where you give up. You have to give up the old ways, because you have to see nothing works here. But if you're still holding one tiny, even 1% of your mind that there's something to get here, you'll compromise. You'll want something. But I just saw plainly that nothing here, nothing I did to try to get my daughter off drugs or was working, because I was using guilt. Right? I didn't realise. I had no idea. So I then completely just decided, that's it, I'm doing this course. And so I really had to try to get an understanding of how to hear the Holy Spirit. And so I found books by people. So I just went looking for other teachers that could help me understand. So my endeavour was not to ever be a teacher or anything other than, I want this peace. If I can have this peace of God, I want it. And if he's telling me I can have it, just tell me what I need to do. So I started the lessons again. I went to a Course in Miracles group that was on. It was an hour's drive for me to go to this group, but I went every week. They had some workshops run. The people that ran the group, there was a husband and wife, and the male had been over and had been trained or in Ken Wapnick. He visited Ken Wapnick and gone to some of his workshops. So he was someone that was really helpful to me. So I became like a little baby that knew nothing. I just said, I'm ready to be completely transformed. So there was this really, like he says, to let go that we know anything. So when that real giving up, you just say, look, I've I just don't know anything. If everything, if everything in my mind is bringing me grief, I have to have a new perception of everything. I don't want to hold on to this grievance towards my father, my dad. And that was the biggest thing for me. I had huge forgiveness lessons to do. So it took 2 years to really undo all the grievance, the big grievance, the egoic grievance that I had towards my dad. And the ego just would do a song and dance about how right it was in its perception of my dad, and you're letting him off the hook if you don't hold this grievance, and you're going to say that what he did to you was all right. And it just, so you have to, that story that the ego comes up with about if you let go of the grievance, it brings its story up into your mind, and it says, so you're going to say this is okay, what he did to you, by you letting this go. So you have to have the joining with the Holy Spirit in your mind, and it comes above that. So anytime the ego raises its voice and its argument about, of why you shouldn't practice forgiveness, and let go and see the holiness and the beauty of your brother, the Holy Spirit, you have to have that trust in the Holy Spirit each time. So I had to really, first of all, learn to listen to that voice. So I spent a lot of time in quietness, in meditation, writing down things that were coming to me. So I was never interested in sort of knowing the course or talking to others and debating about the course and what do you think this means or whatever. I was never interested in those groups. I was so interested in just being free. That was it. I was interested in just that freedom that I felt. So I started the first 12 months, I cried. Most of that 12 months, I was sort of like releasing, years and years of pent up anger. I don't know what it was, but I just remember just crying all the time. I went to retreats, even though I was talking the other day about this beautiful experience on the retreat, but most of that retreat I was crying as well. But it wasn't crying because I felt victimized or anything. It was like some sort of healing crying. It was like something was just purging out of me. Then 12 months later, nearly to the date, it was actually my daughter's 21st birthday. The morning of it, about 3 o'clock in the morning, I went into a revelation experience in my bed, and I just woke, and I was just in this most beautiful love, this pristine quietness and love. And I'd never had that experience before, and now I live in it. But that was the first time, and it was so different to how what I'd felt before. And then as I went back to sleep, and I woke up at about 6 o'clock in the morning, it was still there, and then it slowly eased away as my mind roused, thinking about the day I was going to. So it showed me that 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 this was available, that this was coming in, and I was sort of getting this guidance, there's more to do, to keep going. So I changed how I viewed my life completely. My life was not about getting anything anymore. It was about I'm going here to my job to see what triggers are left to be undone. I'm going to a family Christmas function to see what triggers are there, so the Holy Spirit can undo them, so I can be free. So everything was about bring it on, bring on the triggers. Let me see, because I had worked so diligently with the Holy Spirit, really see He will come. This is the message I wanted to really bring in today. You can't do it on your own. You can't do it. You have to have a guide, a helper. And that guide and helper will give you, we have our own unique journey, and he uses different things. He'll use different parts of the course. He'll give you different teachers to follow for certain periods. You know, you might follow someone for a month or two and then drop them and go to someone else. So he's in charge of the healing of our minds. And so I just noticed that it would be, you know, he would just bring me in. I would be guided, okay, go and meditate now. It would just be like a feeling, go and get quiet now, just meditate for an hour, quieten your mind. But what I started to do was during this period, I was living on my own. A friend came to stay with me for a certain period of that 2 years. But there was some of that time where I was living on my own. But even though she was living with me, you know, she just did her own thing. So I had the opportunity to really spend a lot of time in quietness and really going deeply into my mind and getting shown, you know, getting this idea of looking at the egoic thoughts and having that. So the Holy Spirit gives us another perception. So whenever I was upset, I'd straight away tell myself I was in a wrong perception. I took responsibility and say, okay, I'm upset. I have to have a wrong perception and I have to get correction. So that was the way I went about those 2 years, was to say, okay, think about my dad. If I get upset, I need correction. Think about my mum. If I get upset, I need correction. I think about my boss, my sister, my whoever. If I wasn't feeling this perfect love, this pristine love to anyone, I needed correction. So I just accepted that the correction had to come. And so anytime I would have any upsetting, you know, I'd be upset, I'd get quiet. And I would say, okay, Holy Spirit, I give you my perception at the moment. This is what's in my mind. Help me see this differently. I want another perception of this. Above all else, I want a different perception, because that I knew that other perception would bring me peace, right? So his view always washes away the upsetting thoughts and brings your mind back to peace. So the other things I did were I worked full time for a lot of this. I was an accountant, so you don't need to leave your job to awaken. So I'd listen. I'd wake up. I'd wake up a bit earlier. I'd do my meditation, my lesson, my contemplation. Get ready for work. I'd listen to something in the car on the way to work. It was an hour's drive to work. During my work day, I'd stop, I'd say my lesson. At lunchtime, I'd go out. I'd either go and sit in a park and meditate, or I would listen. I'd put headphones on and listen to a course teacher, or, you know, the course on, you know, anything to do with the course. And then I'd go back to work. I'd be doing my lessons throughout the day. I always dedicated myself to the lessons and did it exactly as he said, as best I could. Of course, no one does it exactly, but the best I could. And then on the way home in the car, I'd be listening, or I'd be in silence. Yeah, I didn't read newspapers. I didn't listen to news. I didn't listen to the radio for that 2 years. I blotted out basically the world. I just didn't want anything to do with worldly things. And I knew that if I needed to know something, someone would tell me. And we had a really big bushfire in Australia. There was, you know, it was miles away from where I lived at one stage, but someone messaged me and said, you know, have you got a lot of smoke around where you are? And I said, no, what's going on? So I just saw that, and I really didn't even need to know about that. So if I needed to know about something, someone would say, but what was being brought in? I had so many beautiful lessons by the Holy Spirit. He said, the news is just on a cycle. You you know, in 1950, they would have seen some news like this. There was bushfires, there's murders, there was rapes. He says, when you look at the television or you look at a screen and you hear news, it's just recycled the news of the world. In other words, this world doesn't change. It's just recycling its news over and over and over. It's just like boring old news again and again. It's like if you sat down and listened and they accidentally put on a 1956 news thing, you'd be like, oh my God, they're just the same stuff that's going on today, right? So he just said, you don't need to watch the news because you're watching an illusion of a world that you're not in. So he really, he took me right through. And, you know, the Holy Spirit is actually us. We are the Holy Spirit. But when we start out, we have to think of the Holy Spirit as our helper. We have to ask the Holy Spirit all day long for help, all day long, every moment. Okay, someone's just said this. How should I respond? Now, maybe we don't have that time. So you can sometimes, you know, for me, if I got really upset and I couldn't really sit quietly at that moment, I would wait till I got home and I would sit down and I would recall the incident. And I'd just say, okay, Holy Spirit, this is what happened. These were my thoughts about it. And, you know, then he would show me the meaning I gave it. And, you know, it'd be, but a lot of the time, it took many times to really wash out the unforgiveness I had in my mind or the egoic way I was thinking and perceiving. So it didn't happen all at once. It was 2 years of intense mind training that I went through, and I would get home on a Friday night on some weekends and I'd say, okay, this is my Course in Miracles retreat weekend. I'm not seeing anyone. This is just me in my unit where I live. And I had some Course in Miracles song. Donna Marie Carey at that stage was really the only one that had Course music. So, you know, I'd say, okay, this weekend I'm going to work on the guilt around such and such. Or this weekend I'm going to go deeper into letting go of the grievances around my dad. So I would set the intention, and so Friday night it would be, so I'd imagine it was just me in my own retreat, but it was me and the Holy Spirit, and I'd say, right, this weekend's dedicated. So I would walk in quietness, repeating my lesson. I would, you know, sit down and listen to Ken Wapnick for half an hour. You sort of feel into when, right, that's enough, I feel to stop now. Then I'd have quietness. I'd let what I'd heard sink in. It's like you're chewing the food and then you're letting it marinate. So you have to have that listening and hearing and allowing the Holy Spirit in the silence to bring it in and illuminate it into your mind. And so I started to get these experiences. I remember saying to the Holy Spirit, so the second year was all about illumination. The first year was all about sort of undoing. There was still undoing to be done in the second year. But the second year was sort of like the popping, the realization. So I started to see this world more as a dream. I started to see that all the meaning I'd given everything. I'm like, oh, gosh, I'd given that meaning, and look at that meaning, and look at the meaning that person's given that. And so it wasn't like a judgment. It was just a noticing. It was more, everything was being noticed. And I went through these beautiful experiences. And one of them said to the Holy Spirit, show me how there is no time. Just show me how, you know, you talk about this holy instant or this eternal now. I can't see that. I feel like I'm living in time and that time's linear. And, you know, that's how I'm experiencing time. So if there's another way to experience time, show me. And a few days later, I was out walking along the river where I lived close by. And, you know, I was just having a walk, just being present. And all of a sudden, I remember I just got this dropping in that everything is now. It's always now, and the past and the future aren't here, and there's only now. And my mind just went into this realization and this experience of it, and it's never changed since then. So, and then on the nearly 2 years to the day, I think it was the 21st of January 2015, I went to, it was a Wednesday morning, I got up to go to work. I was doing my lesson, and I got in the shower, and as I was in the middle of the shower, it was just something just completely changed in my mind. And it was because my mind was so purified, and my dad had been completely forgiven. And the last time I saw my dad, I just opened my arms, grabbed him and kissed him all over his face and just told him how much I loved him. And I just, I was just holding him. I knew who he was. I knew, and so what happens with your mind is when it's been healed of it's through the holy relationship. When you're seeing only holiness, there's nothing to stop you awakening. So I believe that's God taking the final step. There's a bit of discussion about that, but to me, it felt like I didn't do anything. I was just in the shower, and it was like something opened up, and I just saw everything as love. I just looked at the world differently, and I'm like, oh my goodness, everything's love and everything's joined. It's all unified. It was like I was living in a big soup of love, and it was just gorgeous. And and then I was driving to work, and I'm like, oh wow, this world is so different. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's holy. It's just love. Everything's love. Everything was just blessing me. Like the trees were love, the buildings were love, the cars were love. I'm like, oh, this is just so beautiful. And I get to work, and my boss walked in, and he said something to me, and I went, oh, he thinks he's a person. Isn't that funny? He thinks he needs money. Oh, that's hilarious. And I remember saying, oh my God, I'm seeing something. I was sort of seeing it, but I was also had an awareness of seeing it as well. And I'm like, nobody knows who they are. Everyone's asleep. Oh my God, everyone's asleep. And I was too. And I'm like, oh man, this is like seeing the sleepiness of everyone thinking they're a real person walking around to be believed. You know how he says it in the Course. I'm like, oh, so I also lost this sense of self, this identity being in a body, and I just saw everything. I was everywhere in everything, and I was like, oh, it's just so beautiful. We're just free. We're free. Um, and then after that, so that was 2015, which is about nearly 6 years ago now. And yeah, there was just this sense of there's no me to awaken. There's just freedom. But I did have to do, there's as he says, there's purification that needs to be done, and I had to work with the Holy Spirit, and I still work with this higher mind, this this Christ control. Every day it doesn't feel I make any decisions about anything. It's that part of my mind which was Cate is gone. But one thing I'll just say is what I've seen the tiny mad idea. I saw the mind. It's like, in the Course he says the Holy Spirit looks back on time and sees it. It's like you see that too. You see as the Holy Spirit sees. You see the holographic nature. You see the world as a dream. You're aware of dreaming. You're aware this is a dream, and that and I've been able to move my mind out of my body. I've been completely well. The body doesn't have any autonomy. That the body can't get sick by itself. It's the mind that causes sickness, not the body. The body, it's like all these things that you read about and ponder about and think, wow, look at that. Can't imagine that. That sounds so weird. You're actually living it. You know it as a truth. And that's why he calls it knowledge. It's not like you're trying to understand it. You know it. It is your living way of being. There's no doubt in your mind anymore. And so that's sort of when when you really shift over into it. It's just, and so how I live my life now is just amazingly, it's just beautiful. You know, I just, whatever's happened yesterday, it's gone. Whatever happened 5 minutes ago, it's the past. The past isn't a past. It's like the holy instant is always here. It's the eternal now, and it's absolutely beautiful. No matter where I am or what I'm doing, I'm just, oh my God, this is the best moment ever. You know, so it's just living in this joy and this happiness and just a peace of God, and it just hasn't moved. You know, I have had the ego sometimes comes back in, but tries to, and it offers you this silly thought, and you're like, oh, as if, oh, come on, you know, trying to tell me, trying to judge my brother, and I'm like, come on, that's just craziness. I know who my brother is. So, what I came to see was that it's our beliefs, that the Holy Spirit has to undo all our beliefs about everything, and what makes a separate self that we feel is us. So the personhood is made up of beliefs, and as the Holy Spirit undoes those beliefs, you don't have to undo the I, you have to undo the beliefs, because the beliefs are what make you think you're a separate self. They actually, each thought that the ego has this underlying that I'm a separate self. Each thought, you know, it says I am such and such. So each thought that we get from the ego, underlying it is the idea of separation. So all those beliefs have to be very gently, with the Holy Spirit, He'll undo the beliefs in your mind. And with that goes this idea of separation and a separate self. And, you know, my message to everyone is there's no loss or sacrifice in awakening to this mind. You still operate, you know, I still garden and walk my dog and talk to my neighbours and see my family, but I don't have to say what I'm doing. All they know is that I have completely changed. Some are curious, some aren't, but it doesn't matter. And they get a little bit, they look at me a bit strangely with what comes out of my mouth, because I just say I'll never ever be depressed again. I couldn't have a depressed thought if I tried. I couldn't be depressed because I found the cause. So once you find the cause, which is your thoughts, the ego thoughts, you have them changed by accepting the Holy Spirit. Those thoughts get changed to God's thoughts. How beautiful you are, how holy you are, how lovely you are, how holy your brother is, how holy, you know, your holiness was created, you know, you are created by holiness. So all that starts to come in to replace all these, you know, these old dead rubbish thoughts of the ego that are just, you know, they're full of guilt and fear, and they're just lies. So that's a brief sort of story.
And a fascinating story. Thank you so much for sharing it with us, Kate. We feel really honored to be able to present your understanding of A Course in Miracles to our group.
Thank you. I'm very honored
Yes,
to be
Kate,
here.
and yes, so salute that you finally just said nothing's working. Nothing's working. I'm going to dive in wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I
And one
appreciate
thing to
that.
remember, that it takes as long as it takes. I just said I was going to give it 2 years, but I didn't know it would take 2 years. I just thought I'll do this for 2 years and then I'll reassess. So if you've been feeling like you have done it for 2 years and you haven't had the awakening, keep going. Because I just said, I'll do this for the rest of my life. I'll just keep doing this every day for the rest of my life. Because even if you don't feel like, believe me, it wasn't easy at times. I had a lot of fear, a lot of terror in my mind. But just keep going. It takes as long as it takes. So we don't know. I mean, obviously we're watching what's going by, and I can sort of get glimpses of future things, and, you know, but I don't want to talk about I don't want to talk about some of the things that I've been able to see and do because I'm in the holographic mind most of the time now. Well, all the time, pretty much. Because the ego it thinks in time, so you can get used to being in it, but you're sort of, you know that this world is using time. So in the end, I started to think, how can I be helpful? Because you can't give this to anyone, because everyone has to do it, you know, work with the Holy Spirit for themselves. But so what I was told by the Holy Spirit was, it's my certainty and my willingness, and just to let people know that if you do really go wholeheartedly into the course and work with it, you will be carried across those fearful times. You know, when you think, what's going to happen to me if I completely surrender to this love and let go of my life and let go of the world and let go of my relationships, let go of my money. You can't bring anything with you. You know, you have to let go of everything. You have to let go, you know, that's the thing. You can't hang on to anything. And that's probably the hardest part. Is it doesn't mean that you're never going to have relationships or a house or anything. It just means that your hands, you stop grasping it, you let it go, and you say, your will only, I trust. And that's the really big hard part right at the end. You know, you start off and you do the lessons, but towards the end, it's really, you have to do this big surrender and say, I give you everything. I hold on to nothing. So that's that little paragraph in lesson 189. You know, simply do this, you know, let go of everything. Hold on to nothing. That's what he means when he says hold on to nothing. So you say, I let go of my house, I let go of my life, I let go of my body, I let go of my children, I let go of my parents, I let go of my pets, I let go of my beliefs, I let go of my political ideas, I let go of you know, being a man or a woman. I just, you know, any belief you have, you just let go. And that's the tough one, but that's the freedom. And you see, if you can do that, if you can say, I'm ready to do that because I know that the peace and freedom lies there. But that's what has to be done. You can't bring anything with you, with God. You can't be saying, I want the peace of God, but I still want to direct and control my child so they don't die. You know, and that's why Holy Spirit said, you have to be okay with your daughter dying, because I'm going to show you there is no death. So let her go. If you can be free of this idea that she dies, if she dies, you can be helpful. You can be really, truly helpful to her. And just on that, my daughter did get on her own spiritual path and has awakened, which was really surprising for me at that stage, that she, you know, and she is so helpful to so many people. She's so beautiful. She just says it's all about love. I am love. And so you never know who you're going to affect and how things are going to change when you do your journey. It's just absolutely astonishing to me, the people I've been able to help, because it all really came from me just saying my job is to accept the atonement. That's my job. And that's what we do for each other. As we individually accept the atonement, we show others how to do it by saying, I'm accepting the atonement. I'm accepting the correction today. I'm upset about this, so I'm going to get correction. No, so
What a beautiful ending to your story, Cate. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. Any last words, Carly?
Thank you, sweethearts. Lovely to be with you.
Just sending our love to all of you. Thanks again, Cate. Bye-bye.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I'll do it with you, Teresa.
Carly dashed off. I guess she wasn't feeling well up to it.
Oh, okay, that's all right. Um,